Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1098, 1098. Friday, April the 10th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Friday everyone. You're going to be awfully glad that you tuned in to today's TowerGate because we have some major breaking news on the Spygate front. Two important stories we're going to cover today and then a few other news items. So let's go ahead and get into it. Hold on to your MAGA hats. Here we go. Well, it looks like the Department of Justice, through the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, has now released one of the transcripts from this, what Devin Nunes has described as Bucket 5. And there's several things involved in Bucket 5, and this is one of the things that Devin Nunes was talking about in his Bucket 5 of things that he thought should be declassified and released. And so this first thing that they have released yesterday, the Department of Justice and the ODNI, is something that both if you watch Maria Bartiromo, she had both John Ratcliffe and Trey Gowdy on her show multiple times where they talked about this exculpatory evidence that should have been given to the FISA court regarding the FISA warrant on Carter Page. Now this will be the first FISA warrant, And one of the things they used to justify that FISA warrant was, of course, George Papadopoulos. And so what they have released is this is what Ratcliffe and Gowdy were talking about. Gowdy and Ratcliffe had reviewed these documents a long time ago, which shows clear exculpatory information. Should have went to the FISA court, but most importantly, it shows that there was no real justification for any investigation into Papadopoulos himself, and this certainly should have destroyed the credibility of the so-called evidence that we're using to get the first Carter Page FISA warrant. So what this is this is a confidential informant, and this is a new confidential informant that we've never heard about. This would be what they refer to in the IG report as confidential informant number 3. And this is someone that no one's ever heard of. But this individual happens to be someone who had worked previously with Papadopoulos at a think tank. So the FBI went to this individual and asked them to help them frame Papadopoulos. So this guy's name is Jeffrey Weissman. W-I-S-E-M-A-N. Weissman. Jeffrey Weissman. He is confidential informant number 3. And it is the transcript between he and Papadopoulos, which was released yesterday. Now, Weissman was tapped by the FBI because he knew Papadopoulos and from previously working with him. So they have this guy wear a wire. And what they want to do is they want to get Papadopoulos to admit or go along with the idea that the Trump campaign was either working with Russia and the so-called hacking of the DNC, or they were aware of it in some way. And many of you have read the transcript. If you have not read the transcript, it's everywhere. You can go read it just about anywhere. Just Google it. It's everywhere. I just read through it. It doesn't take that long. The full 175 pages, it's 175 pages, but there's really only about 20 key pages that you have to read that tells you everything. The rest of it's a lot of other stuff. Remember, the way that this guy was trying to get to Papadopoulos, first of all, Papadopoulos thinks he's talking to a friend and a guy he formerly worked with. And this guy's like, oh yeah, let's go out and have some lunch and then maybe go over to the casino and play some blackjack. And so he spends a lot of time just talking about stuff with Papadopoulos like friends would talk to one another. So he softens Papadopoulos up by just having casual conversation and kind of leads him down this path. And then eventually he starts getting into Trump-Russia, starts getting into asking about whether or not the Russians hacked the DNC, whether or not the Trump campaign is somehow a part of it, if they know someone who's maybe behind the scenes working and is involved in this whole thing. And of course, throughout this, once this line of questioning from Papadopoulos' friend, this so-called friend, Jeffrey Weissman. Not much of a friend, if you ask me. He was trying to set him up for the FBI, frame him. This guy, Jeffrey Weissman, starts asking these questions about Trump, Russia, the DNC, hacked emails, and all this kind of stuff. And then, as you can see, if you read those crucial 20 pages, you will see that Papadopoulos immediately pushes back on that, says, no, that's crazy. That's just a crazy conspiracy theory. I don't know where it's coming from, but I can absolutely guarantee you 100% sure the Trump campaign has nothing to do with hacking any DNC emails, or doesn't care anything about any of the DNC emails or anything like that. So throughout this entire 20 pages, you can see where this guy, this so-called friend, this Jeffrey Weissman guy, continues to push harder and harder and harder and harder on Papadopoulos till he finally starts pissing Papadopoulos off. In which case, Papadopoulos starts dropping the F-bombs and various other things, saying, man, you seem to get off this. I mean, this whole thing is stupid. This is nonsense, ridiculous. I don't know why I'm talking about this. It's all bullshit. There's nothing to it. I don't know why you're even talking about it. So you can see that Papadopoulos actually gets, really ticked off at the fact that his so-called friend is wanting to press so hard and keep pushing him on this, when Papadopoulos keeps telling him this is total bullshit and we would never do anything like that. It's not that we did. It's not just that we didn't do it. It's that we would never do it. It's crazy. It's illegal. We would never do anything like that. We don't need to do anything like that. And so Papadopoulos, in every way possible, tried to tell this guy, and keep in mind, he's wearing a wire for the FBI, and he's telling this so-called friend, he just keeps blowing him off and telling him, hey, this stuff's crazy, let's talk about something else or whatever, but the guy keeps pushing and keeps pushing, so we're clearly working very hard. Now, there's a couple other key things about this, is that this occurred about 2 weeks before the election in 2016. So you can see they're pushing really, really hard. They're dying to get something, anything they can, out of Papadopoulos so that they can use it to drop it at the last minute on the Trump campaign to hopefully cost him the election. And Papadopoulos was the guy that they were counting on, that they could press or push or coerce into saying something that they could use. But Papadopoulos never gives them anything. He continues throughout this entire process while he's being recorded by his so-called friend, this Jeffrey Weissman. Papadopoulos never gives them anything. So this conversation occurs 2 weeks before the November 2016 election. And then, within a month after that, they go get the first Carter Page FISA warrant using Papadopoulos is one of the reasons, and they don't show any of this exculpatory information that occurred in this conversation where he was being recorded. They leave that completely out, and so they throw in this other stuff from Alexander Downer or whatever, because they can't get anything else. And of course, there's still a lot of questions as to whether or not Papadopoulos ever even said anything to Alexander Down the Hatch Downer about emails, Russia, anything like that. Papadopoulos says he doesn't recall that even coming up in the conversation with Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. Now, so they go have lunch, and then they go over to a casino after lunch, and they're playing blackjack. And it's at this point where this guy, after a couple hours of kind of buttering Papadopoulos up and just, I guess trying to Papadopoulos' confidence, say, hey, I'm your old friend, remember me? And hey, let's get together and have lunch. And they're talking about just normal stuff. And then once they go over to the casino, have a couple of drinks. Once he gets a couple of drinks in him, that's when the FBI informant wearing the wire starts pressing Papadopoulos on this stuff about Russia and the DNC hacked emails and all that kind of stuff. So Papadopoulos, again, multiple times throughout this conversation, tells Weissman that he knows for a fact that nobody on the Trump campaign was involved in any way, shape, or form with the hacking of the DNC, nor do they know anything about it, or care, for that matter. And, of course, this was withheld in the FISA court. This document you can read is 171 pages, although there was really about 20 pages that you need to focus on. The rest of it is just, again, this shows you how this worked. The FBI went to someone who they knew was a friend of George Papadopoulos, had worked with him at a think tank. And they get him to wear the wire. Why? Because they want Papadopoulos to feel like he's just talking to a friend, some guy he used to work with. They're just out catching up, having some lunch, going over and playing a little blackjack. Then the drinks start flowing, and that's when the guy starts bringing the pressure and starts trying to. And you can read the transcript. The guy just won't let go. He just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And Papadopoulos eventually starts getting frustrated with him. And he's like, I don't know why you're even talking about this. This is just crazy conspiracy theory. I don't. This is just nuts. So anyway, you can see all this. You can read it for yourself. The transcript is now out. And so this is one of the things in Bucket 5 that Nunes has been talking about with Bartiromo. It's also the specific thing that Gowdy and Ratcliffe were telling Bartiromo, that they read this 171-page transcript, and they knew for a fact a long time ago that had the FISA Corp been given this information, they never would have gotten the FISA on Carter Page, nor would they have ever been able to move forward with framing Papadopoulos. So this is very, very important information, and it's just one of the pieces of the bucket 5, and it's being suggested that we can expect over the next week or two other items from what Nunes described as Bucket 5 will soon be released as well. So we'll be on the lookout for that. So extremely damaging information. And some of this occurred in the IG's report, but it was in the footnotes, and it was redacted from the report that was released. And that likely had to do with the fact that it probably would have possibly interfered with Durham's investigation at the time. But now he's well beyond this point, so it's no longer matters to Durham. He's already, whatever he needed out of this, at this point, whatever he needed, he's already gotten, and releasing this information now, as well as some of the other things in that bucket number 5 that Nunes describes, is probably now doesn't really matter to Durham, because he's far beyond where he was then. He's far beyond that now, and this is all just this is all just prologue at this point. So now let's get on to the next important piece of news regarding Spygate. And this is, I think, really, really telling. Laura Ingraham did an interview with Attorney General Barr. It's a 2-part interview. She covers multiple subjects, including coronavirus and stuff like that. But she also asks him about the Spygate, Durham's investigation, and also about the firing of Michael Atkinson. And part 1 is already out, and you can watch that. Part 2 will occur later this evening, and you can watch that too. But we already know because it's already been, the interview's already happened. It just hasn't been aired. But we know from people who know what's in the interview what Barr says in part 2. So we're going to go through both part 1 and part 2, even though part 2 hasn't even aired yet. Let's go through what AG Barr told Laura Ingraham about specifically, she's asking him about the investigation into Durham's investigation into the corrupt deep state and the coup. And here is what a couple of comments Barr made in that interview. He says, quote, "There was no basis for the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into candidate Donald Trump." Now, think about the words he's saying here. Barr, being the Attorney General, and especially with this investigation going on, and especially with the politicization of everything he says, understands very, very much what he is saying, and he is very careful with the words he is using. So let's evaluate that last phrase again. No, there was no basis for the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into candidate Donald Trump. He doesn't say, "I think." He doesn't say, "it may look like." He doesn't say any of those types of words. He says, in a very factual manner, carefully choosing these words, there was no basis for the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into candidate Donald Trump. Man, oh man, that tells us a lot. That tells us the entire Crossfire Hurricane investigation into Donald Trump, so far as Barr is concerned, and that would have to do with what he's learned from Durham, there was no basis for it. In other words, it was illegal. It was illegal. Crossfire Hurricane investigation was a fraud. It was illegal. Now, later on in the interview, you're going to get what Barr thinks should happen when something like this occurs. He goes on to say, quote, "I think what happened to him, Trump, was one of the greatest travesties in American history. And without any basis, they started this investigation of his campaign. And even more concerning, actually, is what happened after the campaign. A whole pattern of events while he was president to sabotage the presidency. In other words, a coup." Let me read that one more time, word for word. "I think what happened to him, Trump, was one of the greatest travesties in American history, and without any basis, they started this investigation of his campaign, and even more concerning, actually, is what happened after the campaign, a whole pattern of events while he was president to sabotage the presidency." So he points out that the hurricane, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, during the election period was illegal, unwarranted, no basis for it. Then he goes on to say, and what happened after he was president from January 2017 on, it was a whole pattern of events that were intended to sabotage the presidency. In other words, a coup to take out the president. Barr has just told us everything we need to know about what's coming down the pike. He's not saying we think, we believe, there's a possibility, some evidence may suggest. No. These are very matter-of-fact terms. Durham has already sniffed this thing out a long time ago. He knows that major crimes occurred. He knows the entire investigation into the president during the election season was a fraud and was illegal. He also knows that everything that happened after Trump was inaugurated, including the Mueller witch hunt, the renewals on the Carter Page FISAs, the investigation into Papadopoulos, the setup and frame-up of Manafort based on the faulty and phony Black Ledger, and all the things associated with that. The whole damn thing, the whole thing was an effort to sabotage the president. In other words, a coup. Barr and Durham already know exactly what we know, and probably a lot more about the details. We know the big picture. We know what happened. I've been documenting that for 3 years. Many of you have been following this story for probably that long, and you know it as well. Now, Barr just told you that he knows what we know, and that means Durham knows everything we know and a lot more. So the only thing really that Durham and Barr have to do right now is get all their facts and evidence together and then go make their case in front of a grand jury. There's no longer any doubts that Barr and Durham know what happened. There's no longer any doubt whether they're looking into finding out if something illegal went on. Barr is telling us that, something definitely illegal went on. Everything that went on was illegal. Operation Crossfire Hurricane was illegal. It was crime. It was a crime. A big fat crime with a lot of criminals involved. And it went all the way to the top. And that's what Barr and Durham are trying to figure out now. Get all their evidence together and then figure out who the people are who are going to be charged with these crimes. He goes on to say, now this is what's going to be aired in the interview that's going to happen later tonight. But here's what he's going to say in that interview when it's released to the public. Laura Ingraham asked him about Michael Atkinson and Trump firing him. Now, as you know, over the past couple days, it's been suggested, and I have a tendency to agree, that the firing of Michael Atkinson had something to do with the Durham investigation. What they've learned from the Durham investigation. And I said it was kind of funny that Barr had not come out. Everyone else is commenting on the firing of Michael Atkinson, but Barr had not, which is kind of strange because he's the Attorney General. He's over the DOJ. And he would certainly have something to say. So Laura Ingraham asked him about that. And Attorney General Barr tells Laura Ingraham, Trump did the right thing to dismiss Inspector General Michael Atkinson. Trump did the right thing to dismiss Michael Atkinson. Atkinson was involved in Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the FISA warrants on Carter Page, including the first one, the most important one. He was involved in the Ukraine Whistler coup attempt, and he was probably working on the next coup plot. Had Trump not fired him, they probably knew what was coming down the pike, probably got wind of it, and that's probably why he's fired, because it's something he's probably was working on with the bug-eyed fool Adam Schiff and their friends in the media. So there you have it. Attorney General Barr saying, no, Trump did the right thing to fire Atkinson. And as we speak, we heard the other day that Grinnell is firing 5 more IGs, and today that number grew to 7. We also know that there's been dozens of other top-tier management-level positions within the intelligence community who've also been relieved of their duties. We just haven't even heard about them because they're like mid to upper-level bureaucrats. Lots of people are getting shit-canned in the intelligence community by Rick Grinnell right now, and Barr doesn't have a problem with any of it. If he did, he'd be talking about it. So he obviously is right on board with the firing of all these inspector generals, because likely all of them had some role to play in the coup or something they're working on now. Durham also goes on to talk a little bit more about, Barr goes on to talk a little bit more about Durham's investigation. And this is what he says, quote, Durham's primary focus isn't to prepare a report. He is looking to bring justice to people who engaged in abuses if he can show that there were criminal violations, and that is where the focus is. Like I just said, they've already determined that the crimes occurred. They've already determined that what they did prior to the November election to stop Trump was illegal. They've determined everything that they did after Trump was inaugurated was illegal. Now they just have to put together the evidence that can be used to prosecute the perpetrators. That's what Barr is saying right here. He goes on to say that, quote, the evidence shows that we're not just dealing with mistakes or sloppiness. There is something more troubling here. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And if people broke the law, and we can establish that with evidence, they will be prosecuted. One more time. Attorney General Barr. Durham's primary focus isn't to prepare a report. He is looking to bring justice to people who engaged in abuses if he can show that there were criminal violations, and that's where the focus is on. The evidence shows that we're not just dealing with mistakes or sloppiness. There is something more troubling here. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And if people broke the law, and he already told you that they did, if people broke the law, and we can establish that with evidence, they will be prosecuted. Now, following all of that, we get a tweet from George Papadopoulos. He tweets out, quote, my profanity-laced interview with yet another loser informant has been published. I promise you, there is a conspiracy case being built around this frame job. I know exactly who it is. Justice is coming. Also, Papadopoulos tweets that, where is Joseph Mifsud? He also tweets, the $10,000 entrapment scheme will blow this wide open. There you go. So this is how this has been throughout this entire, Spygate story since I've been covering it. You'll go months, it seems, sometimes with doesn't appear anything's really going on because everything's going on behind the scenes. Then all of a sudden you'll get a days or a period of weeks and sometimes even months, just an avalanche of information. And then things go dark again. And then you get these releases again. So it's been this way throughout the entire Spygate story since I've been covering. And that's why I tell you guys to keep the faith. I'm telling you, the coup plotters are going to be exposed. As I've said before, there are going to be 3 to 4 dozen, 35 to 40, somewhere in that range, high-level criminals going to prison. They are going to be charged with conspiracy. And not just individual violations of this article or that article or this code or that code of the criminal code. No. I'm talking Durham is going to make the case for a criminal conspiracy which will engulf dozens of people. How high up it goes, it's hard to say. It's going to at least go up to certainly Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan, head of the CIA. It's going to go to certainly Comey and McCabe, number 1 and number 2 at the FBI. Strzok and Page probably included in that. You're going to have probably State Department officials involved. Certainly going to have people to the Department of Justice, many of those people involved. Whether or not he actually gets into like Susan Rice, Samantha Power, Obama himself, is hard to say. When you also have to talk about the private contractors, Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, Christopher Steele, Mifsud, Downer, all these characters who were involved. You also have foreign intelligence people that were involved. The governments of Italy, possibly the UK, possibly Ukraine. We have Alexandra Chalupa. We have corrupt people within the deep state. I mean, it goes on and on. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of people who get caught up in this web. And it's a complex conspiracy, and that's why we have to be patient. But I am 100% confident, as I've been saying for probably more than a year now, since Durham was put on the case, that I am absolutely certain that this is not a head fake, that they are, in fact, looking to bring justice to the criminal perpetrators and to expose the truth about what really happened in the Spygate story fiasco. So the crime of the century, the biggest crime in American history as far as a political crime is concerned. It's going to destroy the legacy of the Barack Hussein Obama and put a lot of formerly high-level officials behind bars. Take it to the bank. Take that to the bank. It's happening. It's happening as we speak. Now, we have a few minutes left. I want to add a few more comments on a couple things other than the Spygate stories. But I hope you enjoyed that. It appears to me that Doctors Birx and Fauci are starting to look like complete fools. They are starting to look like complete fools. I am done with both of them. Both of them. And just yesterday, Ron Paul, the good doctor, Ron Paul, who can smell bullshit a mile away. If anybody can smell bullshit coming out of Washington, D.C., it's Ron Paul. And he's a doctor, by the way. His entire family are doctors. His son just got over coronavirus. And Ron Paul says, you need to fire Fauci. He's a fraud. Ron Paul, fire Fauci. He's a fraud. I got to go with the good doctor on this one. That's why I supported him in 2008 and 2012. He tells the damn truth. He can sniff out some bullshit from miles away. He spent many years in that town, and he probably knows Fauci. Probably knows who he's connected to and what he's all about. Ron Paul, fire Fauci. He's a fraud. And take the scarf-wearing magpie with you. He also suggests that coronavirus is a big hoax. I don't know if I would use the word hoax. What's being done around coronavirus is a hoax, but it's starting to look more like, to me, that when you see things like this virus comes out of a lab, a biolab in China, where George Soros has financial interest, and you ask yourself, who is hurt mostly by this, rolling out this virus and all that's happened since then, and all the bad advice Trump has gotten from people like Fauci and the magpie with the scarf? It's Trump. See, right now, Trump cannot go out and give those big rallies, can he? That's why they want to keep this thing going past the November elections. They don't want Trump out there doing those rallies. That's the major reason that they want this thing to last until beyond the election. They don't want Trump out doing rallies. In the meantime, they want to keep the economy tanking. They want to watch the job losses by the millions per week. They want to watch the markets crashing. This is all good for Democrats and the New World Order and the globalists like Soros and his friends. And let's not forget China. Trump's been busting their balls and kicking their ass on trade deals. Looks like a little mutual cooperation there to me. So if that's what Ron Paul is talking about, yes, then it's a hoax. Well, the demo commies have blocked in the Senate. Chuck the Cuck Schumer in the Senate has blocked the $250 billion small business loan program extension. Now, again, who benefits from this? The Democrats. And what are they doing here? Well, they're holding the Republicans and President Trump hostage. What they want is $500 billion, and they want the money to go directly to the states. Well, that's a stupid idea. It makes no sense whatsoever. And where does Chucky get his numbers from? And if we need $500 billion, we'll come back and get the other $250. But right now, the administration thinks we only need $250. Now, what are they talking about? Well, in the last bill they just signed, they included a provision which would allow small businesses to go get business loans to meet their payroll so they wouldn't have to close down their businesses and fire their employees. And if they use all the money that they borrow for paying employees and nothing else, just meeting payroll, they don't have to pay the money back. And because so many small businesses have applied for this money, the fund is looking to go dry in a couple of days. So they wanted to quickly put some more money back in that fund to continue this because it's keeping people employed and it's keeping small businesses from having to go belly up. And this is what the demo commies in the Senate just blocked. Because they want $500 billion instead of $250, and they want money paid directly to states. What do you think the Democrat governors will do in the states that receive this money? What do you think they'll use the money for? It won't be to help the economy get going again, not to help their states get back to business. That ain't going to happen. The goal is to keep this thing around as long as possible, to keep Trump from giving rallies, to keep the economy from recovering, to force as much pain, misery, and suffering on the country as possible so they can blame it on Trump in November. Evil. Pure evil. I keep telling you. Pure evil. These people are not just fucked up. These people are evil. And as I've said many times before, you cannot negotiate with these people. You cannot reason with these people. You cannot try to convince these people. You can only defeat these people. We must defeat them soundly. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good evening. Stay safe. Stay healthy. See you. Bye.